The clink of champagne glasses echoed under the crystal chandeliers. Laughter rippled across the ballroom, golden light glinting off polished marble floors. My parents stood at the center, radiant in their tailored outfits, celebrating their 25th anniversary like royalty. Then came the moment. A velvet box was lifted onto the stage. My father opened it with deliberate flair, revealing the gleam of a $15,000 Cartier watch. The crowd gasped, cameras flashing. My sister's eyes sparkled as she slid it onto her wrist, basking in applause that felt rehearsed. I stood in the shadows, my smile frozen, my place in the family photo deliberately erased. The photographer didn't even glance my way. My parents didn't call my name. I was invisible in the celebration of their perfect family. The sting burned deeper than the exclusion. It was the message. They wanted me to know my worth was nothing compared to hers. But as my sister raised her wrist high, smug in victory, I thought, they believed this would break me. They had no idea what was coming. Growing up in my parents' house felt like living inside a glass museum. Everything was polished, fragile, and meant to be admired, not touched. My mother kept the floors gleaming, the curtains ironed sharp, the furniture arranged so precisely that even moving a cushion felt like a crime. On the surface, our family looked perfect, but beneath that shine, there were cracks only I seemed to notice. My sister Claire was the masterpiece in their collection. Golden hair that shimmered in the light, a laugh rehearsed to sound effortless, and grades that my parents boasted about at every dinner party. She was their pride, their pearl, their chosen one. And me? I was the shadow in the corner. Quiet, reliable, always there to pick up the pieces when Claire broke something, literally or figuratively. If she missed curfew, I covered. If she forgot an assignment, I shared my notes. If she failed a test, I was the one who spent hours tutoring her until she scraped by. But no matter how much I gave, the scales never tipped. My parents rewarded Claire with lavish gifts, endless praise, and the kind of affection that left me wondering if I was part of the same bloodline at all. For me, there was only silence, until I made a mistake. Then the silence cracked into sharp criticism, cold reminders that I wasn't enough. I still remember the first time I felt the sting of favoritism like a knife. It was my 16th birthday. I had spent weeks building up the courage to ask for something small, an old camera I'd seen at a pawn shop, nothing more than $100. I wanted to capture the world the way I saw it, through details others ignored, the way sunlight softened brick walls, the colors of autumn leaves scattered like confetti, the fleeting smiles of strangers on sidewalks. That morning, I sat at the kitchen table, heart pounding with quiet hope. My parents set a small box in front of me. My fingers trembled as I pulled at the paper, only to reveal a pair of socks. Thick wool socks, navy blue, practical. My father smiled stiffly. "You're always cold. These will help." An hour later, Claire walked in from school to find a brand new iPhone waiting for her. No occasion, just because she'd been working so hard. I laughed it off then, hiding the ache in my chest. But later, when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the thought gnawed at me. Why wasn't I worth even a fraction of the joy they poured into her? From then on, the pattern only deepened. Vacations where my name was missing from the reservations. Family photos where I was positioned at the edge, sometimes cropped out entirely. Even at holiday dinners, my parents would toast to Claire's accomplishments while my achievements barely earned a nod. I learned to shrink myself, to make peace with invisibility. Silence became my shield. If I didn't expect anything, I couldn't be disappointed. Still, I found small ways to keep my spirit alive. I saved the crumpled dollars from odd jobs, mowing lawns, shelving books at the library, helping neighbors with their groceries. I tucked them into an old cigar box under my bed. Each bill felt like proof that I could build something of my own, no matter how small. That cigar box became my secret rebellion, my reminder that worth wasn't something they could measure in gifts or approval. But favoritism has a way of growing, like a weed left untended. It wasn't enough that Claire was praised more. They needed me humiliated too. One evening, during a neighborhood barbecue, my father clapped me on the shoulder, drawing everyone's attention. "This is my son," he announced with a grin. For a moment, my chest lifted, foolish hope sparking. Then he added, "He may not be the brightest, but he sure knows how to mow a lawn." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Claire smirked into her soda, enjoying the spectacle. My face burned as I forced a smile, swallowing words that begged to be spoken. That was the first time I realized their favoritism wasn't just neglect, it was deliberate, a performance designed to elevate her by diminishing me. And deep inside, something began to shift. I didn't know it then, but every slight, every humiliation, was building toward a moment that would change everything. By the time I left for college, the imbalance in our family had become second nature. Claire was the star, I was the backdrop. At first, I thought distance might change things, that being away would let me breathe, maybe even earn their respect on my own terms. But favoritism doesn't vanish with miles. It stretches, it seeps, it finds ways to follow you. Every phone call home turned into a running monologue about Claire, her new job at a boutique, her talent for networking, the way people just adored her, my updates about pulling late-night shifts at the library or making Dean's List, barely earned a distracted, "That's nice, honey." Still, I kept working. Tuition wasn't cheap, and unlike Claire, I didn't have a safety net. I took on extra shifts, living off ramen noodles and secondhand clothes. My parents sent Claire monthly allowances that dwarfed my paycheck, yet they never once offered me help. I didn't complain. But at night, lying awake in my cramped dorm, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder how long someone could live unseen before they simply disappeared. Then came the smear campaigns. Claire had a way of making her cruelty look like charm. She'd drop casual jabs into conversations, planting seeds that spread like weeds. At a family gathering, she'd smile sweetly at relatives and say, "Oh, you know my brother. He's brilliant with books, but not so great with people. He prefers to stay in the shadows." They'd laugh, nodding, never realizing she was sharpening the knife while sipping wine. Worse, my parents echoed her words, reinforcing the narrative. I was dependable, sure, but not exceptional. Practical, not dazzling. It ate away at me, not because I wanted applause, but because I wanted to be seen. Just once. Sleep slipped further from me. I'd lie in bed, my chest tight, replaying moments of humiliation. My hands shook during exams, my heart pounded in crowded rooms. The stress wasn't just mental, it carved itself into my body. I thought I was alone in this battle, until one night, something unexpected happened. I was shelving books at the library when Rachel, a girl from one of my classes, walked up. She had a soft voice, curious eyes, and a way of noticing things most people ignored. She leaned against the shelf, watching me arrange the spines. "You're always here late," she said. I shrugged. "Somebody's got to keep the place in order." Her gaze lingered. "Or maybe you're hiding here. Because it's quiet." The words struck harder than I expected. No one had ever seen through me like that. Not my parents, not my professors, not even myself. Rachel didn't press further, but she started showing up more often. She'd bring me coffee, slide into a chair with her laptop, and work in silence. Sometimes we talked about books, sometimes about nothing at all. One night, as I walked her home, she stopped under a streetlight, her breath fogging in the cold air. "You know," she said, "you don't have to let them define you. People like that, families like that, they only win if you keep believing their version of the story." Her words lodged in my chest like a spark in dry wood. For the first time in years, I felt a shift, not just anger, but something stronger. That was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. The night of the Cartier watch wasn't the only time I was erased, it was just the most public. What came after was worse. A few weeks later, my parents called for a family meeting. The words themselves felt heavy, formal. Family meetings weren't a tradition in our house. They were a performance, a stage for Claire's triumphs or my failures. When I arrived at their house, the dining room had already been set like a courtroom. My father sat at the head of the table, arms folded, his face carved into authority. My mother was beside him, a thin smile masking the disdain in her eyes. Claire, of course, lounged across from them, the Cartier watch glinting under the chandelier like a trophy. "Sit," my father ordered. I obeyed, heart steady, but wary. He began with accusations cloaked as concerns. "We've been hearing things," he said, voice heavy with implication. "Neighbors say you're wasting your time at the library. That you're..." "Directionless," Claire smirked. "I told you, Dad." He hides in books because real life is too much for him. My jaw tightened, but I stayed silent. Then came the threat, sharp and deliberate. My mother leaned in, her perfume cloying. "We're considering restructuring the inheritance. It doesn't seem fair to reward someone who doesn't contribute as much as Claire." The word inheritance dropped like a stone. It wasn't just about money. It was about legacy, about erasing me completely from the family line. For a moment, hopelessness pressed against my ribs. I pictured years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the jobs I worked to prove myself, all swept away with a signature. But beneath that despair, another image surfaced. My cigar box, the crumpled dollars, the proof of every hour I'd carved out on my own. It wasn't much compared to their wealth, but it was mine, untouched, untainted, a reminder that my worth wasn't theirs to decide. I inhaled, steadying myself. "You do what you think is fair," I said quietly, meeting their eyes. "But don't mistake silence for weakness." For the first time, my father blinked, a flicker of surprise. Claire's smirk faltered. My mother's lips parted as though she wanted to say more, but nothing came. The room shifted. Power tilted, just slightly, but enough for me to feel it. They thought they still had control. They didn't. What they didn't know was that I'd already started documenting. Every slight, every humiliation, every transfer of money that favored Claire. Rachel had shown me how to keep records, how to build a paper trail that couldn't be denied, and while my parents clung to their image of authority, I was quietly building something stronger, evidence. As I left that night, Claire hissed under her breath, "You'll regret this." But in her eyes, I saw it. The first flicker of fear. After that family meeting, the tension didn't fade. It spread, like cracks through glass. My parents weren't used to resistance, and they didn't take it lightly. The rumors began almost immediately. At church, neighbors who once greeted me with polite nods started whispering behind cupped hands. "He's unstable," I overheard one Sunday. "Doesn't know what he's doing with his life." At first I thought it was paranoia, but then an old family friend pulled me aside. "Your sister said you've been struggling with, well, mental health, that maybe you're not fit to handle responsibilities." I clenched my jaw, thanked her politely, and walked away. Inside, fury burned. Claire wasn't content with being the favorite. She wanted me diminished, erased. My parents fueled it, too. At dinners, they spoke loudly about Claire's new opportunities, her sparkling social life, while making veiled comments about my lack of ambition. They painted me as the disappointment, the invisible shadow dragging the family name down. But while they wasted energy building lies, I was busy building something real. Rachel became my anchor. Together, we collected receipts, tracked bank transfers, noted every gift Claire received, watches, vacations, allowances, while my name stayed absent from the ledgers. I filed every photo where I'd been cut out, every message where I was belittled. Piece by piece, the pattern became undeniable. It wasn't just favoritism. It was systemic, deliberate exclusion. The weight of it all pressed on me, of course. There were nights when exhaustion won, when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, chest tight with dread. My hands shook as I logged transactions, my body remembering every humiliation. But I didn't crumble, because every page of documentation, every scrap of proof, was a weapon, and the cigar box under my bed was no longer filled with only crumpled bills. Now it held flash drives, notes, copies of records. What once symbolized my quiet rebellion had become my arsenal. Meanwhile, cracks began to show in their empire. Claire, desperate to maintain her golden image, overplayed her hand. She flaunted her Cartier watch at every party, bragged about the special allowance she received. Neighbors who once envied her began to whisper, not about me, but about her. Debt rumors swirled, stories of bills unpaid, bridges burned. I stayed silent, letting the tide shift on its own. Silence, I had learned, could be a shield, but when paired with truth, it became a blade. Then came the moment that told me their downfall was near. Rachel and I were at the library late, the glow of her laptop painting her face in pale light. She leaned over, scrolling through the compiled records, then looked at me with steady eyes. "This isn't just favoritism anymore," she said. "This is evidence. If they try to erase you legally, this is how you fight back." Her words settled over me like armor. The day of reckoning was coming, and no one could stop it. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and cold stone. Light filtered through high windows, cutting sharp beams across the polished floor. Every sound, heels clicking, papers rustling, echoed louder than it should have, as though the building itself demanded silence. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands steady on the folder Rachel had helped me build. Across the aisle, my parents whispered furiously with their lawyer, Claire leaning back with her sunglasses perched on her head, smug as ever. The Cartier watch gleamed like a challenge. When the judge entered, the room hushed. The proceedings began quickly, my parents' lawyer painting a picture of me as ungrateful, irresponsible, undeserving. "Our clients have always provided for their children," he said, voice slick with confidence. "But it is clear their daughter Claire has shown the ambition and responsibility that entitles her to a greater share of the estate." My father nodded firmly, my mother dabbing at imaginary tears. Claire smirked, as though the verdict were already hers. Then it was my turn. I rose slowly, carrying the folder to the bench. My voice didn't need to be loud, it only needed to be steady. "With all due respect, Your Honor," I said, opening the folder, "the truth tells a different story." I laid out receipts, lavish transfers made to Claire, gifts worth thousands, evidence of favoritism so blatant it spoke louder than any accusation I could make. Photos projected onto the screen, family portraits where I was cropped out, text messages where I was dismissed, mocked, erased. Each page landed like a hammer. The courtroom grew still. My parents shifted uncomfortably, the confidence draining from their faces. Claire's smirk faltered, her jaw tightening as the Cartier watch caught the light again, this time not as a symbol of victory, but of excess. The judge leaned forward, eyes sharp. "The evidence is clear," he said, voice carrying the weight of finality. "The inheritance belongs solely to the heir. This court rules in their favor." The gavel fell. The sound rang out like thunder, final and undeniable. I turned, not to see the reporters scribbling notes, not to watch the spectators lean in with wide eyes, but to see my parents. My father's hands trembled. His authority cracked. My mother's mascara streaked down her cheeks, her composure shattered. Claire sat frozen, disbelief etched across her face. For the first time, I wasn't the invisible one. I wasn't the shadow. I was the truth. And as silence filled the courtroom, I spoke calmly, not for them, but for myself. I don't want apologies. I want change. The days after the verdict felt strangely quiet. No more frantic calls from my parents. No more messages from Claire dripping with mockery. It was as if a storm had finally passed, leaving only debris in its wake. My parents withdrew from the community they once dominated. Their seats at church were empty, their names absent from charity rosters and HOA meetings. The couple who once stood at the center of every gathering now hovered at the edges, their power dissolved in whispers of shame. Claire, stripped of her pedestal, vanished into the city. Rumors followed her like shadows, unpaid debts, broken friendships, doors that no longer opened when she knocked. The Cartier watch remained, but its shine had dulled, an ornament of a legacy already gone. And me? For the first time I could breathe. I didn't rush into mansions or luxury. Instead, I bought a modest home on the edge of town, a white porch wrapped around the front, a garden where lilacs would bloom in spring. Rachel helped me paint the kitchen a soft yellow, sunlight pooling across the walls like warmth made tangible. The house wasn't grand, but it was mine. Untouched by expectation, free of comparison. On the mantel above the fireplace sat the cigar box. No longer just a hiding place for crumpled bills, it was now filled with tokens. The folded court ruling, Rachel's handwritten notes of encouragement, a few $2 bills I kept as reminders that value isn't about numbers. It's about meaning. Each object whispered the same truth. Nobody can take this away. I returned to the library, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The quiet order of shelves, the smell of paper, the soft shuffle of students seeking refuge. It reminded me of who I was beneath the scars. I started funding programs for kids who didn't have the chances Claire and I once fought over. Scholarships, after-school clubs, reading workshops. Little seeds planted, each one a promise that the cycle of neglect would end with me. At night, I'd sit on the porch with Rachel, cicadas humming in the dark. The air felt lighter, my chest no longer heavy with dread. For the first time in years, food tasted richer, sleep came easier, and silence, once my shield, had become my peace. But I carried the lessons with me. I learned that family isn't always bound by blood. Sometimes it's built from those who stand beside you when the world tries to erase you. Rachel, Miss Patel from the library, even strangers in that courtroom who offered quiet nods of support. They were my chosen family. And I learned that silence has two faces. For years, I thought enduring quietly was strength. But true strength was speaking when it mattered. True strength was standing in that courtroom, my voice calm, my evidence undeniable, and refusing to be invisible any longer. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in orange and violet, I lifted the cigar box in my hands. The wood was scratched, the corners worn, but it had survived. Just like me. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph in the shallow sense my parents once chased. It was freedom. It was peace. And as I set the box back on the mantel, my heart steady, the words came to me. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Have you ever faced favoritism, betrayal, or the quiet cruelty of being overlooked? Maybe it wasn't about money or inheritance. Maybe it was about respect, love, or simply being seen for who you really are. I know the weight that kind of silence carries. I also know the strength it takes to rise above it, to stand tall in a room full of doubters and say, "You don't get to decide my worth." So I want to hear from you. What moment reminded you that you weren't alone? How did you reclaim your voice, your power, your place? Share your story in the comments, because someone out there needs to hear it. Remember this, worth isn't something they give you, it's something you claim for yourself. Fade to black.